Andy Goo with the Good Life YouTube channel, and today we are going over water purification at the 2025 Georgia Bushcraft Spring Campout.
Our distance and direction of travel is directly correlated with our access to drinking water. Once we step off from society, we can only carry about half a day's worth of water. The first thing that we're going to have to do is break our water sources down into three basic overarching categories. And that's going to be moving, non-moving, or what we call slack water, and then stagnant. And each one of those is going to have its own different challenges, I guess you would say, of how we're going to treat this water to make it safe to drink. The first thing, the moving water, is going to be my preference anytime I can get it. And if I can find it, not only do I want moving water, but I want water that's falling and hitting something. And the reason for that is that falling water oxygenates itself. When it impacts something, even if it's more water, it's a more highly oxygenated source. Then we're going to have non-moving, or what we call slack water. This is going to be the backs of your bays, off of the main river channel, farm ponds, things like that. The last thing is going to be stagnant water. The main challenge with stagnant water is it doesn't go anywhere. All it gets is a fresh influx from time to time of rainwater, runoff, things like that, and then you have what's evaporation. And when the evaporation happens, the water leaves, and the things that are harmful to us, chemicals, things like that, stay. And so you'll get very high concentrations in a stagnant. And so what we came up with was kind of a checklist using the word water as an acronym to help us identify what we're dealing with. The first thing on that is wigglers. Your tadpoles, mosquito larvae, water boatmen, things like that. That's going to be a sign of your slack water. It's not moving very much. And that's going to be a situation where we're going to do what's called a coyote well. You have your water source here. You're going to go about 3 feet. You're going to dig down to the water level and let the water filter through the soil. This would also apply to your stagnant, although I would avoid that at all costs. And so once you get your coyote well dug and the water fills up in there, then you're kind of tied to that area. You have to protect it. Animals are going to want to drink from that source just like we do. So if you're trying to be mobile, then you may want to just pass that water source up altogether if you're pressed for time and things like that. The next thing is animal activity. Obviously we wouldn't want to try to use a water source if there was a dead carcass laying there, right? But there's other signs of animal activity. If we can keep some kind of a tracking bandana or a little card where we can identify the tracks, hog tracks. We know that hogs are particularly nasty. There's a couple of things like that that we would want to avoid. But what do we want to look for? That's probably as important as anything. The animal activity I'm looking for is raccoons. They're known to be a fairly clean animal. The other thing is aquatic animals. I'm going to be looking for salamanders, crayfish, and most of all, mussels. And even if the mussels in the daytime are not visibly present because they burrow down, you can see their tracks in the mud as they walk through there and everything. They're known to be filter feeders, and the water source is probably of a higher quality, something like that. And then we're going to move on to turbidity. So turbidity is the reddish brown color that you get from decomposing material in the water source, primarily from hardwoods. And it's from the tannins that exist in the hardwoods. It's the same tannins that they use to bark tan leather, and it's also the same tannins that give tea its bitter taste. It has astringent properties, same as what you would use if you wanted to do a plantain poultice, or if you wanted to use a tea bag to draw out bee venom. It has that astringent drawing properties to it. So it's going to take a little bit extra of filtration to get that out there. One of the ways we can do that is with a 3-tier system of gravel, sand, and then charcoal. Sometimes people put grass or straw or something like that on that just to catch some of the bigger particles. You may have to run it through several times, but there again, we used to set these up in the Boy Scouts. Every time we set up camp, we would set up a tripod, 3 bandanas, set up the 3-tier system. But there again, you're stationary, so you've got to choose the one that works the best for you. Cotton material is really good at absorbing tannins out of the water. It results in a stain on the cotton. So if you're carrying a shemagh, you can double it up 3 or 4 times, you know, something like that. But we want to try to get the water as clear as possible. And the reason for that is those tannins is hard on your internal organs, particularly your kidneys, because of the astringent properties and things like that. The next thing that I'm going to look at is environmental. Now, one of the things that I like to do before I go to a new area is get on Google Maps, find my destination, and start zooming out. Environmental hazards can be commercial farming, chicken farms, hog farms, things like that, because all of that's going to drain to the lowest level, and that's something that you're going to have to deal with. But the last thing, will come to runoff. Now, if I can find it, I want a stream in the middle of a meadow. It will typically have far fewer contaminants in it than one that is at the bottom of a ravine. And the reason for that is everything that rains typically goes straight down into the soil. Hits the water table and does whatever it does. But this right here, everything from however high this hill is gets channeled down into that stream. If I'm forced to do that, I'm going to follow that stream up as far as I can as it meanders around and things like that. And ideally, if I can get to the source where it comes out of the ground, that would be my optimal. It's one of the things about this, nothing's ever going to be perfect. We just want the best possible outcome for the things that we have available to us at the time. It's longevity. We don't want to succumb to dysentery, trying to get where we need to get to. But every one of these points right here is a point where runoff concentrates. Everything from both sides of this comes into here. Everything from both sides of that goes into there. And so if you're gathering your water source down here, and there's a dead deer up in this one, then it's all coming down, all the chemical runoff and things like that are getting concentrated. So it may be a process. Like I said, we can only carry about half a day's worth of water with us at any given time. So choosing where we're going to get it from, we may have to start that process much earlier than when our bottle's empty, So the next thing that I'd like to move on to is, once we've chosen where we're going to get our water source from, now we've got to make it safe to drink. How are we going to do that? Thermal, chemical, and then mechanical filtration. Now, there's a lot of others out there, steri pins, things like that. I'll touch on the chemical first. I try to stick with something that is pre-made. And the reason for that is I don't have to be so careful about the measuring. If you get into the iodine, potassium permanganate, and things of that nature, I'm going to be in a high stress situation. I'm not necessarily going to have time to devote to, did I measure it out quickly enough? Did I wait long enough? you know, things like that. So I'll try to avoid those if I can. We'll stick with just the basic 3. Thermal purification, boiling water, like I said. Now we know that when we're cooking our food, that most everything that's harmful to us dies between 165 and 185 degrees. The reason that we go to boiling is because we don't have a thermometer to be able to test. Boiling is the only visual signal that we have crossed that threshold. And I don't see any need. There's a lot of stuff out there about you need to boil it for 5 minutes and things like that. I can't advise you as to what you would do, but I know for me, once it hits a rolling boil, I'm done. I start the cool off process and then try to transfer it to a non-contaminated container. Boiling it too long evaporates the water off, and just like with stagnant water, there may be chemicals and things in there that were not bioavailable to us that once they are heated become bioavailable to us, and we can then absorb into our body. And then finally, mechanical filtration. Now what I've got set up right here is what's called a pre-filter, and the technical name for it is the wicking method of water filtration. Now all this does is remove anything that I like to call crunchy or chewy. It's just going to get the big particulates out of there, stuff you can see with your eye. If I had no other choice, I would choose that over drinking out of a ground source, but it's still not safe to drink it. But if drinking out of the ground source is going to put you down in 18 hours, and drinking this is going to put you down in 24 hours, and you need that extra time to self-extricate, get back to civilization, or you're waiting rescue, they're going to take care of all of that when they get there. So this may buy you a few extra hours out of drinking directly from a stream. I like passive systems because they free me up to do other things. In the time that we've been talking, this thing is almost done a quart of water. And in that time, if I was going to do a Dakota fire pit, where I had my fire down here, and I'm feeding my wood and air through there, by the time I have that dug, then I should have a quart of water ready to boil. And that's pretty standard. The goal is generally about a quart an hour, you know. So you get your hole dug, get your fire going, and by the time your 32-ounce container is full, it's ready to go in. Now I know we can't carry a pie tin with us into the field, but there are ways that we can duplicate that. Simply with a piece of plastic, some of our rain gear, and right to the side of our Dakota fire pit, we can just dig a small depression right there and line this with some kind of a poncho, a tarp, something like that, and use that as the hole for it to drain into, take our bottle out, get our fire going, and that thing. But using wool was the first thing that we'd ever found that actually worked. Me or nobody that I know had ever incorporated this into our system, because typically what you see is a piece of greasy t-shirt and it takes 8 or 10 hours to get a cup of water. Part of what we're looking for is surface area, and this just doesn't have a lot of surface area compared to the wool fibers and things like that. So the wind blows, it dries out, the fibers get clogged, and it fails. So you're really wasting your time. One step up from that is a piece of bath towel. It did better, not quite as good as the wool. I could get a quart of water in about 45 minutes, which was a huge step up from the old t-shirt thing. But this is just an 80-20 wool blanket. And it's basically taking advantage of the principles of water called cohesion and the principles of gravity. Water molecules water molecules want to tend to stick together. And so basically we're pulling those molecules along through the fibers. One of the things I found out about this versus this was that the water was actually going in between the fibers, whereas the water on this was being transferred on the outside of the towel. But once that is done,
how can we figure out what's going on here?
then this is ready to go into, this is the mechanical filtration. On the second page of your handout, you'll see I've tried to compile the top 3, as much information as I could on the top 3 most common, I guess, filters. And it's going to be the Sawyer, the Life Straw, and the Grail. When you're looking at filters, like the hollow fiber filters, we also want to check for the difference between nominal filtration and absolute filtration. Nominal filtration is just a target size that they're trying to hit. It's no guarantee that the hollow fibers are actually the size that they're selling. So if you can get on there and find out what the absolute filtration size is. So this is a pretty easy. Now they like for you to do. This is how they want it done. You loosen the cap up and use your body weight. This filter's got about 2 months on it, and I use it every day for my 3 liters of water a day. It's good for 65 gallons, which if we're going for a gallon of water a day, you're looking at, 2 months. But if I'm in a bad way off grid, if this only lasted for 2 weeks, a lot of stuff can change in 2 weeks. But I do encourage everyone to have a dedicated drinking container, something that can be sanitized over the fire. Because drinking out of this, everybody backwashes a little bit. And after a while, stuff starts to grow just from, and so if everybody has their own dedicated drinking container, then that solves.
Purify.
One of the principles on this is what they call is ionic exchange. And so if you've ever had a anode rod in your hot water heater go bad, that anode rod is an ionic exchange process to keep the tank of your water heater from rusting out. And it's an exchange. An ion has unequal numbers of protons and electrons. The cations are more protons than electrons, and the anions are electrons, have more electrons than protons. And what that does, so you've got the activated carbon, right? But everything has a net electrical charge. The table, everything has a net charge. And so what they have in here is to exchange the ions to permanently bind the bacteria, protozoa, heavy metals, to permanently bind those to the filter bead. The only drawback is there's no way to backflush this. If you're doing the Sawyer, whether it's the small one or the big one, there's ways to backflush those to extend the filter life if you clog it. But like I said, even if I only got 2 weeks out of this thing, I'm either going to be in a much better place or it's a non-issue anymore, right? Now, as far as one of the things I wanted to touch on chemical, this is a little kit made by Wazoo, and it's got 2 Catadin tablets in it. 1 tablet for 1 liter of water, and it has a 1 liter bag that is rated to 400 degrees. So once you use these 2 up, and there's videos out there of people boiling water in this bag. You can't touch it to flame, but you can inch it closer and closer and actually boil your water in the bag. So that's another resource, and for the size of it, you can, I think this This kit is just a few bucks. It's not. I guess the last thing I have on chemical is Aquamira. They have a time limit on there of about 15 minutes. But if you read the fine print, you'll see that to kill Cryptosporidium, it takes 4 hours. So we have to, because Cryptosporidium has almost a hard shell around it, and it takes that long for it to break down that shell to kill and kill it and everything. So we have to plan that in, you know. We can't wait until we need it, drop the Aquamira tabs in there and think it's going to be ready to drink in 15 minutes. It's just, you know, you're gambling. So the filter that you choose, the method that you choose is going to be very important. And I just don't think there's a lot of margin for error on it. You may hear what's called a PACE plan. And what that stands for is primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. And we can incorporate that here too. You know, my primary would be a known trusted water source. If it's a spring, if it's a well, something I've drank out of before, tap water, that's always going to be my primary. When I bring water from home to camp, that's what I bring with me. My alternate is going to be this. When I run out and I've got to go up here to the house and get water out of the spigot, and I don't know if it's a well, I'm not used to it, you know, traveling around different parts of the country and things like that, then I'm going to use this. My contingency is boiling. That's part of the reason why I just keep a container with me all the time. It doesn't have to be huge. Actually, the smaller it is, the faster it'll boil and the faster it'll cool down for you to drink it. And then finally, my emergency plan is the chemical. And that can be, that's why I stick with stuff that's already pre-measured out. The worst thing I'm going to have to do is pre-filter it and know what the volume is of the container that I'm putting it in. Drop 2 tablets in there and move out. We're good to go.